Hey guys, so as you can see, what's on the screen at the moment is a super simple but still very good Python project for kind of improving your Python skills a bit, interacting with an API if you haven't done that before, and I think it makes a pretty good project also to put on, resume kind of things if you ever do. I know these little projects helped me get the job that I have, so it's a good one to have. And while you're home during quarantine, or maybe you're just stuck inside, partially quarantine and partially because you're on the West Coast with all the really bad air quality and smoke right now. This is a great project to just do. It shouldn't take very long at all. So as you can see here, this application, it presents us with three things here. Every 45 minutes is what I have it set to, but I'm going to do it for an hour for our actual project we're about to attempt. It presents me the date, the AQI, which is the actual air quality index. I'm using the US version here, and that's what we're going to use in this project, but the API I call from also includes the other one. And then also gives us the status. This status is actually based off of the actual air quality index. So you can see here, 0 to 50 is good, 51, 100 is moderate, etc. So if we go back to my application, you can see the AQI is 214, which is very unhealthy. If we go to the chart, 214 would be down here, which is very unhealthy. So that's basically what we're going to be making today. So to start off with, we're going to go ahead and register to get the API. We're going to be using IQ Air right here at the top. I'll have it linked as well below. It's a pretty nice API. I've had no problems with it. I think it's some very high value for how often you can query it. I think per API key for the community version, which is what we'll get, it's maybe 10,000 times a month, I want to say. Maybe 1,000 times. I can't remember. It's more than I'm doing, that's for sure. And I'm having it run, every 45 minutes to an hour. But go ahead and register your account here. Once you can see I already have a registered version here. Once it's registered, you're going to go ahead and click on person here, your profile. It'll be brought to here, and at the very top, you'll see API. So you want to go ahead and click that. And this is actually where you're going to register for a new key. This is mine for my channel here. I went ahead and verified as well. So I'm not sure why that's like that, but I don't think it's a big issue. So we're going to go ahead and get the API key. I'll be deleting it after this, so no trying to use it. So go ahead and click new key. We're going to go and do community because I don't want to pay for it. Create. And then you can see here, we now have this API key. See the name. Mine is free. How long it takes to expire, etc. But this is the important amount of information I actually want to have. First, though, just to get started with our actual Python project, now that we have our key, I'm going to be using Visual Studio Code. And I personally like this as my IDE. You don't have to use this. You could use any. You could. I'm going to also be using the terminal within this, but if you want to use the command line, the terminal, all that works out just fine. I am on Windows, so it should be an issue. I'm not going to show how to download or install Python. I will be showing some of the other steps, but I think there's plenty of resources out there for that. So first thing we're going to do, I already have a folder created, PyAQIUS. So I'm just going to right click, new file, and we'll just name this app.py right now. So to kind of go over what we want to do with this project, we're going to want to query the API, get the data, and we're going to want to present that data to us, right? So there's lots of ways you could do this, a lot of ways to store the data. What I'm going to do in this case is by the end of this, we'll have a multi-threaded application, and it'll be querying the data every hour, and it'll present that data to us. We're not going to be storing the data at the moment. I might make a video later on to actually store the data using maybe SQLite, or maybe I'll just connect it to my AWS instance. But that'll come down the road, and this isn't going to have a GUI either, as you saw, but if people want it, or if I just decide to make it, I might go ahead and do that as well. So just first things first, we have this here. I'm going to go ahead and open up a terminal. Easiest way for me is just to click this. However, might not be so simple for you. Provide, I guess, probably a link in the description showing how to open the terminal just with Microsoft's own documentation. But first things first, when we have any kind of Python project, we want to keep it in its own environment. We don't want to be sharing libraries between different projects, right? So down here in the terminal, we're going to go ahead and use create a virtual environment. So we're going to do Python, then env. Now, since I'm on Windows, I only have just Python here, just means Python 3. If you're on Mac OS, or if you are on Linux, it may not be the case. You may actually need to put Python 3. So keep that in mind, otherwise you might try to use Python 2. But in this case, Python's going to be fine. So we have Python venv. We're going to press enter. And oh, you know what? I forgot the -m to actually call it. Do not forget that. So now we can see up here, once we refresh, we'll have this env folder here. That's what our actual environment will be stored in. So we'll go ahead and enter that environment. Super simple on Windows. If you're not on Windows, if you're on Mac or Linux, it's going to be source, and then environment, I think bin, and then activate. I am on Windows though, so we're going to do environment. We're going to do scripts, and we're going to do activate. And now we're in the environment, so none of the other libraries on my desktop will interfere with this. So let's just make sure this is working. We'll just go ahead first. Super simple, normal thing. Hello world. And we'll save that, and we'll just see if we run it. Python app.py types out hello world. Super simple. So now we are ready to go. So first things first, we're going to want to create a couple variables. We're going to want to add token for the API here. We're going to have an API, I could type properly, token. And then we're going to go back over to the actual site. I'm going to copy this. We're going to bring it over to Visual Studio and make sure it is in quotations. Next, we are going to want to our city here. I'm not going to actually go with my real life city that I live in, but you know what? I think let's do Denver. So Denver. We're going to want to add our state. That would be Colorado. And then we are going to want to add our country as well. And so all of these things will be used when we are calling the API. And the API for US is USA. It's not United States or anything like that. It's USA. So now we have these 4 variables we're going to use to actually call our API. So just to get it kind of running, see how it works, we're going to want to actually have a URL that we call and be able to get some information from that. So how are we going to do that? I personally think the easiest way is to import the library requests, which will actually grab the data for us from the API. And we're also going to import JSON because we want to be able to take the information we get from the API, which is in a JSON kind of format, and we're going to want to load that so we can actually use it. In order to use these, however, since we're in this virtual environment, we have no libraries outside of Python. So we're going to want to go ahead and install those. What we do that is pip, and then we're going to want to do install. We're going to do requests. We're going to do JSON. I'm doing pip3 install request JSON. I'm doing that mainly just because I generally work on JSON. Maybe I already have JSON on here. Maybe it's included. I honestly don't remember. But nonetheless, we're going to want to include these. I do pip3, which is what you'll have to do on an Apple computer or on Linux, which is generally what I work on. So pip should also work, though, if you're on Windows. So let me just clear that so we don't have some bright colors yelling at us while we go to the next steps. So now we have these 2 libraries imported. Go ahead and just add a comment above. We'll just do imports. Now, this is not going to be the best written application. We're not going to include logging. We're not going to include anything fancy like that. It's going to be pretty bare bones. So there's going to be a lot of improvement you can do on your own if you ever choose to. But this will be enough for what we're doing. So we're going to want to create a variable that will actually hold the information we get from the API so we can test it first before going on to the rest of this. We'll just call that results for now. We'll see if we want to change it later. So we're going to go ahead and start off with the JSON. JSON.loads. That way we can load whatever information we get, have it in a usable format. we're going to use that request slide right now. So we're going to do requests.get to have a get call. There's get, post, and a handful of others if you ever want to go more into that. But for now, this is just going to be get. It's how the API works. Now we actually want to put in the information. So the API for this API we're using, the URL for it is going to be http API airvisual.com. We're going to be using the v2 is just what's required for our API call. And then we're going to go by city. So we're going to do city, and then we're going to do city equals. And before we go any further with this, I will include the link to the documentation for this API. There's other things you can use. There's latitude, longitude, cities, multiple states, things like that. But we're just doing this one city. So we're going to do city equal plus, we're just going to be adding the string together, city. Now we're going to want to add that state. So how the API does it is we're going to do an ampersand, we're going to do state, and then just the same thing. And we're going to do it one more time for country. So ampersand country. And keep in mind, these are our variables that we just created up above. And so now we've told the API, okay, we're going to want to be getting Denver, which is what will be replaced here, from Colorado, from the US. But we need to include one more thing. This API is not going to work if it doesn't know who we are. So we want to include that key that we got. Do another addition to this string. And we're going to go ahead and do ampersand key. And then we're going to add that API key, which we called API token. So this whole addition here will create the URL that we actually need. And then we're going to want to change that into text from the GET request. So let's go ahead and do. So now we should have our call giving us information from the API. And to test it, we'll just go ahead and we'll just do a quick. So down here, print. I'm just going to do results and we'll see what happens. So now if I run this, Python app.py, no module requests. That's odd. I have it right here. Did requests not go through either? Using cached. Should have requests. All right, you guys, I found the issue that I was having. It's as simple as, like I said, I normally work on Apple or Linux, so I'm used to using pip3 install like we saw up above. So even though up above it did find a cached value of request, I guess that wasn't a value that was going to work in this instance. So instead, we're just going to go ahead and install again. So pip install requests. Go ahead and install there. We'll just press enter a few times, get that bright color out there. So now if we go ahead and run Python, if I could hit the correct one, .py, press enter, you can see getting this message. So status failed, data, message, arguments missing. But what are we missing here? Actually, it was a super simple thing. I'm sure a lot of you caught it, but I forgot. So, tiny little mistake. Move on from there. So we're going to go ahead and do the Python. Hi. And now you'll see we get a whole bunch of information back. So there's a lot of stuff to unpack here. Way more than we're going to need. We could be using the time they send, but we're going to end up grabbing our own. We have the city that we entered, state, the actual location, including the coordinates of the station or maybe of the city. I'm not sure which one. We have the actual like pollution levels, all that kind of. But we're not going to want all that, so we're going to go ahead and get rid of a lot of that when we actually start. But now we know we have the information, so we can move on to the next step of this, which will be creating an application. So we could have this be running constantly, but we don't want to be constantly pinging the API. Firstly, that's annoying for the actual creators of the API. You want to be a decent person when it comes to not overloading their stuff. And secondly, we only have a limited amount of this we can do a month, right? So we don't want to be constantly pinging. So what would you do instead? Well, you have it kind of sleep. You have it wait. It'll go ahead and request something from the API. It'll present that to us, and then it'll wait a while. But we don't want to just have it sleep, because if we just have it sleep, whole application sleeping, it's going to be difficult for us to cancel the application, to exit it. It's going to be, we're not going to be able to update anything else later on in a future episode when I connect it to a database or when I connect it to some form of like a GUI. It's not going to, run super well. So what way do we get around that? Well, we can go ahead and we can multi-thread. And I'm not going to get into what multi-threading necessarily is, but basically we're going to have our program kind of running 2 or 3 things at once instead of doing them kind of in a set. Like instead of doing one after the other, we can have them kind of run on their own. It allows us to be able to exit the application thing whenever we want. So first thing, in order to get that going, is we're going to want to import threading. That's just the basic Python 3 threading module. Pretty straightforward. And we're going to want to have a couple global variables as well. Now, global variables are not necessarily the best thing to always use, but since this is a small application and it's just going to be for us, it definitely saves some time, and it's I think good for a small application like this, small script. So we're going to want some global variables. And we're going to have a couple here. First, we're going to go ahead and we're going to have the threading condition. I'll get more into what this will do once we actually start creating the thread. Go ahead and mark this as the lock. We're going to use this for some shared variable, but I'll get into it more after. We're also going to have the, let's just call it AQIUS, I guess. And we're just going to set that to 0. And what this is going to be is that's going to be our pollution value, the value that we see when we look at this AQI. That's what this is going to hold. And we're going to have it be global. That way we can present it to the console as well from a different thread. Later on, eventually a GUI. Go back here. We have that. And we're going to go ahead and want to know if they have some data. This is not a huge deal. We can just present it whenever we want anyway. But I personally, when we know it's been updated. And you can do this a couple ways. You can use events. You can use conditions within threading. I'm not going to get into those. We're going to do this the simplest way, which is a Boolean. Now we have these global variables we can actually start. So we're going to want to have an actual application. For that, we're going to want to do the base. We'll just put it a little bit down here. Just the base application loop, the one that looks for if you are using the python app.py command. So that's going to be, let's just go ahead and label this as application loop. And it's going to be if name equals, we're going to do the double underscores again, main. And then in this if statement, we're just going to call a main statement. Now we don't have a main statement yet. So I guess that's kind of the next thing we're going to want to create, right? So we can just go ahead and call this main function. And it's going to be a normal function within Python, nothing special. So define main. And first, we're just going to go ahead and do a pass, make sure all this looks fine. So what this application will now do is it's going to run this, and it should just pass through. We don't have a print function anywhere. It should just complete itself. So we're going to go ahead and run Python again. And as you can see, it just goes through. So now we can start adding some stuff to it. Well, first, let's go ahead and create a threading event. This will be used down the road. I'll explain how once we get to it. It'll be in just a moment. So we have event equals threading.event. And then let's start off with just one of our threads. We're going to have two eventually. We're going to have one that prints to the console. We're going to have the one that grabs from the API. So first from the API, we're going to do thread query. We're just going to call it that. I think it's personally a good name. So we'll go ahead and do a threading.thread, which is part of the library that we imported. And we're going to have a couple things in this. First, we're going to have target. This is what we're going to actually have the thread do. So we'll have to create a separate function for that. So let's go ahead and do that first. Just let that be a little incomplete. So we'll go ahead and call this, we'll do another define. And we'll call it, let's call it worker query. It'll be a worker function since it's going to be linked to the thread. I think it's a pretty decent name. Let's go ahead before we go any further. We'll just do query function. And this will probably, we'll have it take an event so that it knows when to actually shut down, which I'll get to again in a second. So we'll just go ahead and call it event in this as well. And we'll go ahead and pass. That way we don't have to put anything in the function yet. You can just sit there and just continually So back up here, we're going to go ahead and link the target, which will be worker query. And you also have to pass in some arguments. You don't have to pass in anything, no arguments, but as you saw, we have event here. We'll go ahead and pass that event from up top. And this is a tuple, so we're going to want to go ahead and include that comma. So now that we have the thread going, we're going to want to be able to start the thread, which super simple. We're just going to call thread query dot start. Nothing complicated there at all. And then next, we're going to want to work with that actual event, or the threading event. So it's just a way to kind of tell. There's multiple ways you could do it. You can do it with conditions. You can do it with this threading event. You could do it with global variable if you wanted, but that doesn't work quite as well. I personally like the event itself. So we're going to have a while loop within this main function. And we're just going to do while not event dot is set, which means the event is not currently set at the moment. It's just unset. While it is unset, we want to go ahead. We'll have a try and except here. So we'll just do a try event dot wait. So we'll have it wait for 1 second. So every 1 second, it'll just be sitting like that. And then it'll try again. Just basically asleep. And as an exception, we want to go ahead and do a keyboard interrupt. This is basically, if you know on the command line or the terminal, when you press like Control-C and cancels out the application, that's what the keyboard interrupt is. So if the exception is the keyboard interrupt, we want to go ahead and do the event.set and break that. So what are we saying here? We're saying that this main function is just going to continuously loop. Every time it checks to see if the event is set, we're just going to have it wait 1 second. This is kind of arbitrary. You could have it not wait at all. That's really up to you, but we're going to have it wait 1 second. And once it's waited that 1 second, it's going to check is set, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And once there's a keyboard interrupt, it's going to go ahead and do event.set. It's going to set it, and it's going to finish all that kind of stuff. Pretty straightforward. And I'll show what the event.isSet is for in a moment, but basically at a high level, when you have threads, you want to make sure that you actually close the threads and they exit properly and all that kind of stuff when your application closes. I believe I'm mostly certain that modern operating systems like Windows 10, they can stop the threads even if you don't. The system will catch them as being a headless thread, but I'm not going to go ahead and take that chance, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. So now we can go ahead and start working on this worker query. So with this, we're going to do a couple things. First, we want to go ahead and grab some of the global variables we have. We'll do global updated. We'll want that. We're going to want the global AQS so that we can go ahead and change it. We're going to have the global, actually, we should probably also add time because that is part of the console thing we have here. It's right here. So we'll go ahead and add that in as well. Import. I believe it's just called time, but I don't have anything to show it, so we'll just call it time. So now that we have this time, we can go ahead and also create a variable called up here, a global variable. We can go ahead and create it called a local time, and we'll just set that to 0 for right now. Okay, so back down to worker query. I'm going to go ahead and add that global time. I did not capitalize the T, but nonetheless. So we'll want to be doing this constantly while this event up here is not set. Very similar to this while loop. So we'll go ahead and do while not event.isSet, which, as you guys I'm sure remember, is brought in right here as an argument. So while the event is not set, we want to go ahead and grab from our API, update the AQI, etc. Right? So we'll go ahead and do another try except. That way our application does not just break if something goes wrong with the API. And we're just going to go ahead and come back up here. We're going to copy this, put it out of there, and we're going to go ahead and paste it right there. So now we have our API being grabbed. It's being put into results. And let's also create up here, we'll also create a successful query. We'll set to false right now. We'll have this successful query just so that we know whether or not the query's been updated within this. It's just going to be a local variable, so it's not going to be available out here like the global ones are. And so if this result actually was correct, and it looks like this is not properly lined up, so we're going to go ahead and do that. If this result is able to properly load the JSON from the API, we want to go ahead and set successful query to true. And if anything else happens, we're not going to throw any errors. We're not going to deal with anything. It's a simple script. We're just going to go ahead and set this to false. So now we have the actual data. We want to be able to update things here with it, right? So to do that, we're going to go ahead and do an if statement and just check if it was a successful query. And if it was, we want to remember up here, we have this threading condition. So this is finally coming into play. We're going to have two threads eventually. We're going to have, like I mentioned, we're going to have the one we're making right now, and then we're going to have the one that actually presents it to the console. And they're both going to be grabbing these exact same variables, the AQIUS, the uptime. And now we're going to be timing them with some wait functions. So they're not going to be running at the same time, or they shouldn't be. But I think it's still good practice to include lock, even. Careful about this. A lock just basically means only one of them will be able to grab the variable, and the other one will see it's locked, see that there's something saying the variables are grabbed, and it'll wait until the lock is opened again. So with that information, we can go ahead and use the lock down here. So we're going to call c.acquire, which basically says, give me that lock. That condition is now mine. And we're going to start to load in our information. So AQIUS equals results. I just have this. You could break up the JSON yourself. That's included up here. You can down to find it on your own if you want. But so I didn't have to do that during this. I already have it written down. So we're just going to do data. That's the information we want from this. There's other air quality things you can have in here. And we're going to do the US version, which is AQI. Next, we went ahead and imported the time library. So we're going to want to go ahead and update the local time as well. We already called the global here, so we know that local time is going to be the global variable. So we're going to go ahead and update that as well. So that will be local time, and we're going to want to have it presenting in the way that I already have it in the console. So that would be ASC time, local time, time.time. We'll go ahead and go on. So we went ahead. We know that AQIUS is now that data. So we're going to go ahead and say that we updated it, which is the other global variable. You'll see where that comes into play later on. And we're going to go ahead and let everybody know that we're releasing this. So we're going to do C notify all, which is our condition. We're going to want to notify that we are releasing it, which is what we'll do right here. And after it's released, we're not going to want to just go ahead and go back again in the while loop and do this again. The data is not going to change. And I believe most of the stations that this API actually grabs from that measures, I don't think they measure more than maybe once an hour, maybe once every like 45 minutes. But that'll change kind of between them. So there's no reason to constantly be grabbing this. That's just a waste. So we'll go ahead and grab that event. We'll do .wait, which is similar to a sleep statement. And we'll have it wait for an entire hour, just to make sure we get updated once per hour. So we'll set that to 3600, which this is done in seconds, if you remember. So 3600 is just 60 times 60. So 60 seconds in a minute and 60 minutes in an hour. So what if the query was not successful? We'll do an else, and we'll just go ahead and we'll just have it wait. Let's do 15. So just 900 seconds. That way, in case there's an issue with your internet, maybe the API is down, you're not just constantly pinging it. We'll wait 15 minutes. Not a big deal. So now we have the worker query finished. Next, we're going to want to create it for us. But first, I think it's probably a good idea to go ahead and test this, make sure there's no issues. I don't believe I have to import time, but honestly, I may, so we might run into that error. So we'll just go ahead and try running this again. see if anything pops up. And there is something that popped up right there because I did not put an equal sign. Again. And no errors at the moment. So I know we're not printing anything, but no errors is good. Pretty sure it's fine. And so next, we're going to want to go ahead and write the next query, or the next worker function and thread. I mean, this will be for actually printing out to the console what we're seeing. So we'll go ahead and start that. We'll just call this thread print. And it's going to be the same thing, threading.thread. And we'll follow the same naming convention we did here. So up above, we did worker query. So this time we'll do worker print. And we're just going to pass it the same argument. So args equals print. This. Same there. So now we're going to be creating this new thread print. So we need to call it just like we did below. We're going to go ahead and do thread print. Start. And just in case, you know, maybe the query is taking a moment to actually get the information from the API, something like that. We don't want them to run necessarily one after each other because we're going to just try to print right away. So we'll just go ahead and give it as well through the event.wait again. We'll give it 10 seconds just before starting this next thread. So now we need to create this worker print function. So we'll go ahead and do that next. It'll be the same kind of function, just a base function. So define, we'll paste it there, worker print, and we're just going to be bringing in the event. Normally these comments would be a lot nicer, and maybe in a future one, if I'm adding a GUI or adding a database so that you can store this and eventually present it maybe as a graph or something, I'll actually do proper comments. But you know, for this video, this is fine. Just don't no judging on it. So now we have this worker print function. We're going to want to go ahead and bring in these same global variables. So AQIUS global. We'll just do local time and global updated. That way we can those in, which we know is going to be used up in the creating function. So same kind of while loop again, while not event is set. Go ahead and right away, because we're just going to be printing this, it's going to be a super fast thing, no querying or anything like that, no function or no variables we're touching ourselves that are local. We're just going to go ahead and right away, we're going to acquire the, yes, just the condition actually. We're just saying we're going to be grabbing these global variables. And in case it's a little confusing, the condition's not actually affecting or doing anything with these variables at all. We're just basically, because it's not super complicated, we don't need to name this anything crazier than C because it's our only condition here. We know just off the top of our heads that this condition is talking about these here. C.acquire. And this is just going to be a simple if statement just because I don't think it needs to be anything too crazy. It's pretty simple. So here we're going to go ahead and print out this whole function is going to be printing out this. Let me pull it back up over here. We're just going to be printing out the information from this, whether it's unhealthy, etc. So first things first, we're going to go ahead and have a variable called quality, and we're going to go ahead and have that be a string depending on what the actual AQIUS is. So if AQIUS is greater than or equal to 0, which I really hope it is because it can't go negative, and it is also less than or equal to 51, we're going to go ahead and do quality. And etc. elif. I'm just going to copy and paste these to make it a bit easier on myself here. If this is greater than 1, this should actually be that. I only wanted to go to 50. If this is greater than or equal to 51, and if it is less than 100 and 1, we're going to go ahead and to moderates. I'll go ahead and do the same for the others. 50. And this will be healthy for sensitive. This will be 151. And if you're at this point, it's just unhealthy for everybody. Just again, this will be 300. It's a bigger jump this time. And this is very unhealthy. Hopefully you're not breathing in this stuff, which, by the way, where I am at the moment, I am breathing it in at that. It is at very unhealthy. So it's a little too bad. And then the last one, which I forgot that I did something else there. I don't feel like typing this all out. 301, 2. I believe it goes to 500, but we can go ahead and double check because I do not remember what it is called. Yep, 301 and higher. So this is considered hazardous. So hazardous. And just if it is greater than 301 or equal to it. Now, this looks like it's good, but don't forget, we are creating a variable within this. We could have quality outside if we wanted to and just give it a base thing, maybe the 0 or something, but I'd rather not do that. So instead, we're just going to do else. Let's include an else statement. Quality will equal, and we'll just go ahead and make it like an error. That way you can just kind of catch it with your eyes if something is wrong. So we're going to go ahead and do this slash so that we can put this, slash this, error. And then the reason we have these is because within Python, if I do it right below as well, don't include escapes there. It's just going to actually mean something there. And we don't want it to do that. So now we have what quality is. So next step is extremely easy. We're just going to go ahead and print. We'll make a little bit of room from the one. You could clear the whole console if you want, but I like seeing the past ones. And actually, I want this to be in all caps. So current quality. Go ahead and print again, so it's on the next line. Technically, you could do a new line as well, but this I think is just easier to read. We're going to go ahead and do that. We're going to do local time. Print y. And then you can do this in a bit more of a Pythonic way, but I think this is readable. Status. Space right there as well. And we're just going to go ahead and add in quality. Actually, I don't need a space here. This is a good way to, since AQI is just an integer, we can go ahead and do this. It'll create the space itself, as you can see right here. And while you could get, here we're adding two strings together, so we're going to actually want to, like I said, you can do it a fancier way, but this is a way to show the difference. That's why I did it that way. And so now we know that it has been updated since then. We know that the query updated this, which is why this now is able to go this print statement. And so final thing, we just want to go ahead and make that a false so that we're just not printing over and over and over and over again, right? And don't forget to go ahead and notify everybody that you are going to be releasing C, anyone that's waiting for it. And we want to go ahead and release it. So now we have our print function for the console finished. We have our query from the API finished. And we have the threads created to target those. And we have them started. So now if I go ahead and run this again, it should wait 10 seconds because of this wait statement here. It should present our air quality, or not the one I'm in at the moment, but the one in Denver. And it does not. Why is that? Well, we have no acquire. Spell that incorrectly. I feel like I spelled that in. So we're going to go ahead and here. And I forgot a C. I never said I was good at spelling, just that I could make these Python projects. But we'll go ahead and wait again another 10 seconds, and this time it should work, hopefully. goes. So I like to include the typos and errors in this just so that I remember when I was first learning how to do software, it always seemed like everyone was so great at it. Now after university, I've had a job for a while now, all that kind of stuff. I still make the same mistakes. So I like to leave them in. But as you can see here, now in Denver, at this time, it is currently 9:13 at night where I am at the moment. Its AQI is 114, which is unhealthy, sensitive groups. So within this, we have gone over, just to kind of go over the high level stuff, we went ahead and learned how to interact with an API using requests in JSON. We did some extremely simple threading, which is a good way to get our feet wet with that. And we're able to now present this data. And it should run without issue for quite a long time. I've had my personal one running for days now, so has no problem there. If anybody does end up wanting to have something on how to connect this with a database and actually how to export that data there, or whether it's SQLite or whether it's AWS, we could do that with SQL Alchemy. So I might make another episode on that, another video on that. Thanks for watching. I hope this was a fun project for you guys to try out, and then you can end up having it run for a while, like I have here. Just see how much worse the air you're breathing in is, and how much your lungs are probably going to struggle. Although it kind of went down during this episode, so that was nice. Anyway, thanks for watching. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or any recommendations.